Hello, my name is Russell Myers, independent for U.S. President for 2024. Part of my goals as president would be to end certain highly damaging policies which currently exist. These are numerous and span many aspects of American government, economy, human rights, and economics. One key policy, which I would end permanently if possible, would be the Authorization of Use of Military Force, AUMF. This is a policy which was enacted after 9/11/2001 to authorize the President to use military force against other nations without Congress having to declare war against that nation. For 20 years, it was used against Afghanistan. And for the record, we are still bombing Afghanistan. It still allows our military to illegally occupy Iraq and Syria. It allowed the complete decimation of Libya, and the list goes on. It was the AUMF which allowed former presidents to expand U.S. warfare and still allows any president to expand U.S. warfare to any country at any time for any reason, if any reason is ever given. Former U.S. President George W. Bush used it to invade Iraq. Former President Obama used it to expand U.S. bombing and warfare from 2 countries to 7 countries. Over decades, the U.S. has waged war against numerous nations while conveniently labeling this warfare such things as police actions. Korea was not called a war. Vietnam was not called a war. None of the current military adventures, which have killed millions and displaced many millions more, are being labeled actual wars by our government. Ask the civilians of those nations if it makes any difference in their lives whether these actions are called wars or police actions. The designation of war versus police action, or any other term used, has strong implications. By not labeling a military action as a war, that means the U.S. is not subject to international laws which govern warfare. For example, we are not bound by the Geneva Conventions, which govern the treatment of prisoners. It is because of this that the U.S. has been able to use torture of prisoners. If the AUMF is ended, this would most likely mean that the Guantanamo Bay detention facility would no longer be legal and would be forced to close. Our own government has admitted that at least 70 to 90% of the prisoners at Guantanamo were apprehended by mistake, but only after years of torturing these people. It is also the AUMF which allows the government to use civilian contractors, mostly mercenaries, as security forces which are not bound by international law. These are only a few examples of why the designation of warfare is important. The list is much longer. It may or may not be necessary to rescind the AUMF. The AUMF is not permanent, but must be renewed on a regular basis. When it came up for renewal, I would veto that renewal. Before renewal, any president could refuse to utilize the AUMF. I would end all executive authorization for actions used under the AUMF. The end result of all of this would mean that any military action taken against another nation would require a formal declaration of war by a majority of the U.S. Congress. Some may claim this would slow our military actions down. Yet the original AUMF took only 2 days to pass. Only 2 days to pass through Congress, and each specific use of the AUMF It's supposed to be approved by Congress, at least for funding purposes. So time is not a valid disclaimer. I will bring up the fact that President Obama asked Congress for permission to bomb Libya. Pardon me. That permission was denied, yet he did so anyway. I have previously outlined my plans to expand the diplomatic corps of the United States. To enable this further, I would refuse to allow any person or persons previously or currently employed by or who acted as a board member of any weapons contractor to act in any official capacity in my administration. I would also make it an official administrative policy to not allow any holder of defense stocks or bonds to act in any official capacity in my administration. This would include the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, and all military administrative leaders. This will be extended to any relative by blood or marriage employed by or who holds financial interests in military weapons contracting entities in any form. Simply put, no person should have the power to influence U.S. military decisions if they have direct or indirect financial interest in our military actions. War should not be profitable to government officials with any form of influence on military decisions. I may not be able to determine who sits on such committees in Congress that make such determinations. However, I would actively encourage all personal and familial financial ties to military contractors by members of such committees. Excuse me, that was discourage. I would discourage any such ties. Examples being the House and Senate Armed Services Committees. If necessary, I would publicly draw attention to any such financial connections by members of these committees. My cabinet would, of course, have to include high-ranking military officials. However, I would choose officials with the values of avoiding warfare unless absolutely necessary. If any military actions did become warranted, I would not shy from making that decision, but only as a last resort. Even then, that decision would have to include clearly defined goals or mission statements which would be publicly stated. In no way would I engage in or perpetuate such vague and broad-ranging definitions such as the war on terror. None of this means that I would refuse military assistance to other nations that had such need. However, it would again require specific and detailed approval by Congress, including a defined mission statement and time limit. These ideas could go even further. There have been proposals in the past that declaring war on another country would have to be decided by public referendum. This is one area where my proposal for an electronic voting system would have application. There have also been proposals in the past where only active duty service members should be polled on whether a specific military action should be taken. Either or both of these could be implemented. It would not be difficult or time-consuming with modern technology. I will state that if service members were being polled, I would poll only ground troops and air forces that would be physically involved in a given conflict. Upper military leaders remote drone operators, and anyone else that would not have their lives directly placed at risk would not be polled. In no way would the U.S. military be used to defend corporate interests, currently deemed U.S. interests. No, those are not U.S. interests, those are corporate interests. The American public should not have to pay to secure those interests, and U.S. service members should not have to risk their lives for that purpose. Contrary to the propaganda used by a war nation mentality, and some may say our expansive military adventurism does not in any way make America this. Okay. Hey, let me start that over. All right. Contrary to the propaganda used by a war mentality, may say our expansive military adventurism does not in any way make America safer. It does the opposite. 21 years ago, as of this time, we were told that invading Afghanistan would make us safer. We were told that the invasion would only last a few weeks. 2 decades later, we are still bombing multiple countries, more than we were in 2001, by at least 6 to 7-fold. Arming more countries at our own expense, and intensifying our threats to major military powers. Meanwhile, our infrastructure deteriorates rapidly, and social support programs are threatened, in danger of being eliminated entirely. Mainstream media sources have never opposed any military action, and independent voices that do oppose our expansive wars are silenced or denied funding by corporate interests in bed with military contractors. This means that your own voice will only be allowed to be heard if you follow the warmongering mentality. Even the funding for our military makes this country less safe, not more so. In 2001, the military budget was $331 billion. In 2022, that budget is officially $778 billion. The proposed military budget for 2023 includes an increase of another $100 billion over 2022. None of that includes funding for the CIA, FBI, NSA, Department of Homeland Security, Secret Service, or VA. If we want to end our wars, if we want to stabilize and recover our economy in real terms, if we want democracy and peace, we absolutely must end the systems which are doing damage to our economy, our society, our lives. We must embrace the enactment of true democratic and diplomatic changes to a system which has stripped all of that from us. This is only a small part of that process. Please share this article or video. That definitely helps this campaign. Discuss these subjects widely. If you can afford it, please donate whatever you can to help expand this campaign. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a good day.